Welcome to tonight's program from the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. My name is Leah Reeder. I'm the registrar at the Fort Wayne Museum. And tonight I'm joined by Samuel Levi Jones, an Indiana-based artist whose work is inspired by questions of authority, representation, and recorded history. His ongoing practice centers on physically altering objects associated with systems of power and control. Jones often deconstructs and rearranges books into grid-like compositions that expose their flaws and questions the assumed command of the truth that is held between its covers. He's considering information that is selectively left out of books and how brutality is embedded in institutional systems such as law enforcement, education, and the medical industry. Sam is a 2014 Joyce Alexander Wine Artist Prize winner, awarded to him by the Studio Museum of Harlem. His work is in private and public collections, including the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Newfields, or the Indianapolis Museum of Art, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Studio Museum of Harlem, and the Whitney Museum of Art, New York. Tonight, we're discussing Sam's work, which has been included in the exhibition, Personal to Political, celebrating the African-American artist of Paulson Fontaine Press, which is on view at the Fort Museum of Art through July 18th. This exhibition of prints, sculpture, and quilts was curated by Carrie Lederer, curator of exhibitions and programs at the Bedford Gallery at the Lesher Center for Arts, Walnut Creek, California. The exhibition was organized for its national tour by the Bedford Gallery, Walnut Creek. The Fort Wayne Museum would like to thank its sponsors, the PNC Bank, for its generous support of this exhibition, as well as numerous donors to the museum's annual fund who support this exhibition. This activity was made possible by a grant from the Indiana Arts Commission and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency. And to begin our conversation, Sam, you began your career as a photographer, and I really enjoyed seeing your work, such as Malcolm X, the 48 Portraits Underexposed. But my question to you is, do you still see photographic, quote unquote, photographic works that inspire you, or would you like to create something like similar to that?
There isn't anything in particular that I'm inspired by photographically, but I do think back on the work that I've made, and I think about, definitely revisiting making work through the lens, if you will. And, I think in a lot of ways, the way that I work, I work from ideas or sort of events that happen or particular things that happen. And I try to find the best way to portray those ideas. And specifically thinking back on the summer of 2020 and all that happened through protests and whatnot, I had thought about possibly considering sort of the idea of taking to the streets and capturing what was going on, but little things like that.
So would you consider, I was thinking of, and I've listened several times to the narrative from the installation at the Edison School for Arts. Mm-hmm. And that was so intriguing for the children, because you look at them, and I saw the work that's at Newfields. You look at them and you think it's a series of just black squares, in which it's not.
Correct.
And as you mentioned, taken from the 48 Portraits by Gerhard Richter, but yours work includes everyone. And once you keep looking at them, you realize they're beautiful portraits of people from the African-American community. So I can imagine what you would say, that there's sometimes you may want to readdress something.
Yeah, it's a work that it's definitely a work that I need to revisit and sort of, process it a bit and think about how, I don't know, I could work, branch off from that work. And it's the last, I believe it's the last sort of photo-based work that I've made. And then,
Okay.
but this work was, from this work I transitioned into working with the resource books because Richter, he the images that he sourced for his portraits were from the encyclopedia. So that's how I came to the books. And then what you see here is, the pulped paper that I pulped from the pages of the encyclopedia. And, I just continued deconstructing the books and started working with the covers and sort of, I just sort of went off on it. And I've done, even before this, I've done different works that were non-lens based, if you will. And but yeah, I think it's definitely something that I've been thinking about revisiting.
When I saw it at Newfields, I was just blown away. I thought, who is this guy? What is he creating? I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. So if you do something else, I definitely want to see that. I definitely want to see that.
Thank you.
Looking at your other books, your other works, Residue, which is made from pulped law books, and Toxicity. Are you considering a different category of books for your next work, or is it inspired, by something else, an external factor, or what? Because I noted in your titles, you state specifically what type of books they are. And I think of things that have happened to African Americans in the medical field, the Tuskegee tests that were done.
Right.
And I wonder if that's a reference to that.
Definitely, early on, these works were referencing, those issues of medical practice. And I'm glad that we're talking about this work because it's typically when I have these discussions, usually we're talking about the law books or the encyclopedias that I've used. And medical books are just some source material that I haven't used as much, but it's one reason I chose to use medical books was also in the relationship to, how people are more alike than different. And so not only am I addressing, those atrocities to, the Black body or even women through, the practice of gynecology, things like that,
Right.
but also in relationship to medicine itself, big pharmaceutical companies, and the issues that exist within that realm. And because I think too, it's sort of diving into ways in which, trying to sort of, get the viewer to think about the ways in which we are like, and sort of the common battles that we have, and which could potentially lead to, sort of connection and unity rather than division, if that makes sense.
That's true. No, that does. That does. I think of the fact that if you look at when you use books that are from law books, we know it's obvious what was on the records for that, what was in the books. But when it comes to the using medical books, there may be information that people really did not know. So it's a learning curve, and it's a capacity for people to learn more about what happened, the injustices that may have happened. And again, looking at the fact that really injustices may have happened, but we are more alike than we are different.
Yes.
That leads me to, I don't want to get ahead of myself since I have set questions. One thing I mentioned in our past conversation is that in 2020, the pandemic affected everyone, be it an artist, musician, Joe Blow on the street. And how did the pandemic affect you? Did it make you a stronger artist or what?
I wouldn't say that it made me a stronger artist. I think that things that I reference in the work, I think, before the pandemic, there was this, I was addressing things that I would hope people would give attention to. And I think, with the onset of the pandemic and sort of people's, which caused people to slow down and give more attention to the things that that I'm addressing in my work, it sort of became, closer to home, if you will. And for me, it became sort of very intense, and I, actually had to take a break from social media. I think it was off of Instagram for about 8 months,
Okay.
and I kind of had to take a break from making and just sort of do other things, um, to to curb the anxiety.
Hmm. Did you feel a lot of anxiety during that period?
A
Because you have
bit.
a family and you have to consider your family. I know for me, I considered, my family members, some who are affected by coronavirus and not. So did you have a certain level of anxiety and you worked through that through your art?
I think in a lot of ways, one of the things that definitely changed is, the year before 2019, I was really busy,
Okay.
traveling a lot, had 5 exhibitions, and it made me slow down. I was at home more and I spent more time with my family. And I think that sort of that grounding, if you will, I think even just spending more time with my family
Mm,
curbed
mhm.
anxiety more than anything. And yeah, I think, in some ways, even though it was tough, I think in other ways it was a sort of a beautiful thing as well.
I have to admit, it was nice. I pretty much worked through most of the pandemic, but when I would go downtown, like there was no one out. And I thought, this is nice. This is
Yeah,
very nice.
yeah.
Okay, so in 2020, you created a work entitled Blood on the Leaves. And
Mm.
I assume it's a reference from Abel Meeropol's poem and also the song by Billie Holiday, where the second line of the poem states, blood on the leaves, blood at the root. And by 1940, there were 4,000 lynchings, predominantly in the South, and mostly were Black. How does this work? Um, what can you tell me about this work as it relates to you?
Well, the poem that was written was written in direct response to the lynching in Marion, Indiana,
Right.
which was my hometown, and Abram Smith was my stepmother's uncle. And so, you know, have a strong connection to that. And I had made some pulped works. The first one that was shown was from 2019, and I hadn't made too many, but so I'm really sort of getting more and more into this work, and I wanted to push it more. And through the pandemic, this work and working with the material this way was something that I wanted to really get into. And I think one of the things that I told myself was that through the pandemic and coming out on the other end, that it would have made no sense to be doing the same thing, if you will.
That's true.
Um, so yeah, we made this work, and it was at the very early stages of the pandemic. We placed
Okay.
this work, and we donated the entire sale of the work to 3 different organizations.
Wow. Wow. That's
So
great.
that was, yeah, I think, I don't know. I think it's, people react to things in different ways. And for me, I just sort of, I try to give as much as I can, even though at times, like, may find myself in a position to where, like, oh, like, maybe I could have, or should have not given, but like, I don't think about it in that way. And I don't think about it in the sense that, I wasn't really so much thinking about, you know,
Creating a specific work, this
yeah,
specific work.
I mean, the work was very specific, and I wanted, it's another thing too about, that event in Marion is that, these individuals were sort of tried and convicted by the community without due process.
Mm,
And it's a thing that's still very evident within our society today. So
yeah.
just sort of
Yeah.
thinking back on history and sort of thinking about where we are currently, and um, yeah, it's I don't know, it's a very emotional piece for me.
I'm certain it is. I look at it and realize it's made of pulped law book covers. But on one hand, as I'm seeing this, the red kind of glows through the black. and it just makes it like it glows. It's hauntingly beautiful, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
So in this work, let me ask one more question. In this work, knowing it entailed a family member, is this something a narrative you had to express? Is this something that was a desire that you had to express? Or, I don't know, sometimes there's subject matters you want to address because of how it affects your family or you or whatever, but is this something you had to address, or did it just randomly pop up?
I think it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, partly in the way that I found out about it. I was in high school at the time, and a history teacher referenced, actually, pulled out a photograph of the lynching and talked about it during class. And when I went home and asked my father about it, he then, gave me the other information.
Mm,
And I asked, why was it that I was learning about it from some stranger at school? And his response was, it's just something that we don't talk about. And I think, so that's really stuck with me. And it stuck with me in the sense that we have these issues and this trauma and these traumas, within our society in this country, historically and contemporary issues that are linked to the
right,
history of
right.
this country. And if we don't sort of address them and process them, how can we really truly deal with what we're dealing with today? So that was, for me, that's what the work is about. And that's sort of, a huge part of my reasoning for addressing, that event within the work. And
Vestiges of the past, but in the reality, we know it's still present.
exactly.
Thank you for that. Another work that you created in 2020 was Puff Puff Pass. And I delve into this because you're using a different material.
Mm-hmm.
You're using, and I know you're known for using not only pulped books, book covers, footballs, deflated footballs, but this one is football tackling pad covers. And I look at it and it reminds me of a woman's corset down one side.
Okay.
And I see the different orange and the turquoise and the green blending in. So it has a seductive quality. But tell me, why is it footballs and why is it football tackling pads for you?
Well, I played college football, and you know, I played college football just down the road, about halfway between you and I, at Taylor University, and experienced some racial pushback on the football field and a little bit within the classroom. And I made some work early on about it, and it was really difficult for me to make. And I revisited sort of the subject matter during the time that Colin Kaepernick started protesting within the NFL, and that's why I chose this material. And so the title it's kind of fun, but the title from this came from the when I guess the NFL announced that they were going to stop testing and penalizing players for the use of marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, now I wouldn't have thought that from the title. Wow, wow. I always say that an artist, depending on, regardless of what their media is, they have this narrative that has to come out. And I think it gnaws at them until it comes out. But one thing I want to know about Puff Puff Pass, is it actually, what size is it? I don't have that information.
It's probably around 45 by 40 maybe, or 50 by 45 inches.
So rather large and in your face.
Yeah, yeah. And this piece is interesting because of near the center of the work, the black sort of straps on the red, those are actually handles.
Okay.
And then there's a handle in the top left corner. So it's, there's some, texture to the work, and there's sort of very, I don't know, it's sort of very personal, if you will. I mean, when you look at the work, you can tell, it feels like you can kind of grab it and handle it.
I thought this might have been a reflection of some of the things you experienced on the football field and hitting those pads.
Yeah, there is most of the work definitely references those experiences that I've had.
Okay.
And, on occasion just sort of try to make, light of a situation, if you will, by kind of deviating from the seriousness. Um, but yeah, I entirely was definitely, and I think, when you were talking about sort of expressing these narratives, for me, my experience at playing at the university and before I started, and that was my last semester of school there was the first art class. I took a photography class.
Mhm.
And at that point, sort of the light came on, and I knew that that was something that I wanted to pursue. And because through my 4 years there, I just had no idea what I really wanted to
Okay.
do.
Okay.
But yeah, and so we went through the 4 years of that struggle, and through the work, it was a difficult time because I graduated from school in 2002, and I was in Indiana until 2010. And I would have these repetitive dreams of these different scenarios of sort of like reliving the different scenarios of like what it would have been if I weren't sort of inhibited on the field by the coaching staff. And it actually took, I think, when I moved to California for graduate school in Indiana, and sort of through the work and processing these things through the work, it became a healing process, and it was a way for me to process
Okay.
the turmoil that I experienced.
I imagine it may not have been an easy place to go to school.
Yeah, in some ways it was good. I met my spouse there, and I just discovered my passion for art. So I just think
Okay. There's benefits. Yeah.
yeah, there's benefits, and it's, I don't know, I've just kind of got to the point to where sort of it is what it is, and we just try to take the positives from.
I was going to say that you take the best from it and move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So you told me about your, tell me more about your book assemblages and deconstructions. And I'm looking at Dark Truths, Positive Vibration. And there's two works in which you're using book covers and another where you're using pulped paper.
Yes,
So
that's true.
I understand the concept, but let's tell the public the concept of when you're taking these books and you're deconstructing them to create something else and then point the way to another narrative. So
Yeah.
like I said, I get it, but tell everyone else what it is.
For me, the use of the books is sort of, it's the stand-in for these structures, or these power structures. And it's a way of me sort of directly tearing them down and reimagining them in a way, but not so much reimagining, but it's sort of creating this visual object to pull one into a conversation, if you will, or not even a conversation, but just sort of a consciousness around these topics that I'm addressing. And when I started pulping the covers, it's just sort of it's an abstraction of the process of my work. But I also relate it to the ways in which we as individuals and as a society are abstracted to not give attention to the things that are going on around us, and they just sort of happen and play out, and
Yeah.
and I think in a lot of ways we we catch ourselves in these moments where it just sort of feels like it's too late, and it's like, can we rectify the issues at hand, because we're just sort of not giving the attention to the things that in the way that we need to be giving it.
But do you think that sometimes life is so involved for some people that they're on a, for lack of a better word, a hamster wheel to keep going?
Yeah, definitely. I can't, I think it was a Rothschild who said something to the effect of, "I want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers."
Mm. Wow.
And we're sort of in this system to where, yeah, we have to sort of, yeah, we're continually running on that wheel, and we're so running on the wheel of survival, and the larger part of society just like they're in survival mode, and
That's true. I'd agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a woman yesterday that working two jobs, and I thought she's just surviving. She's just managing.
Yeah.
She really needs the day off, but I could see that. I did have a question in your statement is that are you seeking to create through your work a better narrative or a sense of this is what was contained in the law books, but this is a prettier version of the narrative?
I wouldn't say that it's a way of creating a better narrative, but I think it's maybe a way of shedding light on
Okay,
the
that's
narrative that exists.
okay.
Um, yeah, because with you sort of without awareness, how can you deal with something if you're not just simply not aware of it? Or yeah.
Well, that's true. I'm looking at, I believe this is Dark Truths, and it's beautiful in the way you look at it, but I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to a statement that you made in our prior conversation that they invited you to join an exhibition because they needed work by Indiana female artists. And I have to admit, it looks like in Native American textile design or Amish quilt.
Uh-huh.
And in the gallery, I put you across from the G's Ben quilters because it has similar sensibilities. So I know it's not the case, but I'm sorry,
Well,
it's
I'm
beautiful.
I'm totally fine with that. I think it's a compliment. Um, it's a compliment for you to have done that. I think it's a compliment um, for me to have sort of been in that exhibition of all female artists, and which it was intended to be as such, and the curator asked me to participate just because she likes the work that I was doing at the time,
Mhm.
or that I did in that moment. And I also about a month ago was asked to I did a conversation with some amazing female artists, and I had this moment where I like stopped and it, like hit me, and I got teary-eyed because it's I think in relationship to it's not something that I really address in my work, but I have conversations with my partner about quite a bit. We sort of talk about sort of we have these different dynamics, if you will, these sort of different power structures or power struggles, whether it be race, and we also talk about gender as well.
Right, right.
So you know, I mean, that's something that's, yeah, I want to address it more in my work.
I'd say subconsciously you're lashing into the feminist sensibility.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
I have to admit, my background is a painter. So as I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, how did you create? Did you scrub into the book covers to remove some of the paint? Was it an additive process?
Yeah,
Or did you
these
strip away the external cover to leave some of the beige that's showing through?
yeah, the beige that you see is from the cardboard that makes the cover rigid. And the markings that you see are actually from clawing at it. So I soak these in water
Okay.
to loosen the adhesive, to peel them away. And so when they're still wet, I sometimes will scratch at the surface of that paper material from the cardboard um, to create those marks. And then other times I'll just peel them away.
Hmm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm looking at another work you created called Black Codes.
Yeah.
And what is it that you want the viewer to know or experience with this work of deconstructed books? It's law book covers on canvas. And again, created in 2020.
Yeah, these are law books, and then of course the term comes from sort of a code of conduct, if you will.
Right,
that
exactly.
Black folk are supposed to adhere to. And it's just sort of, I'm sort of, these terms come to me um, through conversation or through reading, and it's sort of just a way of, placing it within um, the object, um, again, to shed light on.
So I'm thinking, were I curating another exhibition, I think I would have to attach an additional label to reference what Black codes are, because people may not know, or are they going to be inquisitive enough to do the research on their own,
Yeah, I think
find out what
that's,
that means?
there's that, there's, at times there are those sort of descriptions of the work in the title, but yeah, it's also I think, even going back to the portraits, when you said,
Mhm.
looking at the portraits, at first they look like black squares. And, there are times when people have seen that work exhibited and they come up to me and they don't see the faces. And it's because they don't stop and to slow down and
Right,
observe. And, we
right,
have, I can say, I can say that I'm guilty of that as well, to sort of not slow down and take in what's going on. And I think, for someone who experiences my work, or is familiar with it or is becoming familiar with it, I think that's sort of, part of the thing that I hope that they gain, is that they sort of slow down and give attention to those minute details, if you will.
right. I appreciate the body of work that you've created. I want to ask you about Amalgamation, which is Aquatent that was created at Paulson Fontaine Press, and it also is a recent acquisition of the Fort Wayne Museum. So what can you tell me about this? So
You
I
know
can give the narrative next time.
that
And I have to tell our curator of prints and drawings, but I'm sure she knows already.
that work, that was my first project that I did with the press, and uh, we did four editions, I believe, in that time that we did in that first project. Um, it was, that was the first print project that I'd done with my work, and it was an amazing process and experience. But the term is just sort of, going back to that idea of unity, and I think, I can't remember. So I wanted to say um, medical books, but that green square there is definitely sort of reminds me of use of using the law books. Could I get so not with that being said, I can't remember exactly what books that we use, but amalgamation sort of, it's about unity and thinking about ways in which we can unite, um, no matter who we are, what we look like, what religion, and so on and so forth. But so it seems like such an easy thing to say and think about, but it's a big challenge. And
It is a big challenge.
yeah, um, so that's where the title came from.
Okay, I also I have a reference to plain sight, which is deconstructed footballs, and I just want to reference that
Hmm.
because that gives a whole nother feeling
Yeah,
of
this work here is the height of it is my it's sort of it tended to be sort of like, it's my height, like 5'10", if you will, to sort of reference the figure. Um, but plain sight is there's the saying, when someone says, like, when something's being revealed,
Mhm.
it's like it's in plain sight, it's being sort of like shown to the public or to the viewer. Um, and and it could be, generally speaking of, or broadly speaking of, different, it could be different topics, if you will. It could be, something that's related to, I think a lot of times it's more of reference to, say, a given system that is maybe guilty of something, or sort of like accused of something. and they'll kind of like do it like right in front of your face, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's sort of, yeah, that's what that is about.
Obvious and in plain sight.
Yeah, yeah.
There's two other works, Too Much Power, which use California and Ohio law books. And what I want to ask, and I think I've asked that question again, is are you looking for certain books? And then I referenced the fact that you mentioned there's a set of books that you needed or you wanted, but the asking price was too high.
Yeah.
So what other means would you take if someone offered books to you?
At this point in time, the law books, I've gotten quite a few law books from attorneys who retired, and they
Okay.
can't give books away. The first law books that I used in my work at my exhibition at Studio Museum in 2015, and they were books that I acquired from a law firm in California. And the cover of the books, the finish of the books, they were all the same. And I must have acquired maybe 500 to 600 books, and it was the first time I used them. And the reason I chose to get the books was because I wanted to, hitting on the issue of police brutality.
Mhm.
And so I went and picked up these books. I committed to getting them. I think I rented a U-Haul truck, drove several hours to get them. And I just sort of had my fingers crossed at what I was going to get when I deconstructed the books. And like I said, the covers were all the same, so the finish was the same. But when I took them apart, it was really interesting because they were different colors on the inside. So when I say the inside, like the inside that you don't see after, but you can only see after you take the book apart, they were different colors, and some of them were cloth material and some of them were paper material. So it was a really interesting discovery, if you will, but also in relationship to sort of like, what you think you see on the outside, and then you have this, amazing discovery on the inside.
Your work is so multifaceted, and when you keep digging through the layers of what you find, and that's another narrative that I had not heard before. So that's interesting to know that and relay that fact. I've got a couple more talks to give yet before this exhibit closes, so I'll remember that.
Okay.
To wrap up this conversation, and I threw this question out there to you, and you told me of two people, but if you could meet or talk with any person, alive or dead in history, who would they be and why?
And I had never been asked this question before, but I think I thought about it for a little bit, and it didn't take me a whole lot of time. I thought of Bob Marley, and I thought of Nina Simone.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember watching this documentary on Bob Marley, and he was given this playing this concert in Africa. I can't remember what country it was, but there was, chaos broke out, and there was tear gas being sprayed everywhere and whatnot, and there's just like a lot of commotion. And he stayed on stage and he kept performing. Wow. And he seems like, seemed to be this deep spiritual individual, who in his work there was a deep message, sort of like this deep humanitarian message or emphasis on the work. And I think, and the same with Nina Simone as well. And one of the, I will paraphrase what she said, but she talked about freedom, and she said that absolute freedom is having no fear. So yeah, just sort of thinking about, and their music. I listen to their music quite a bit when I work in the studio. Okay. Just very inspiring for me, and I thought it would be really interesting to have a conversation with such individuals.
I think of Bob Marley, that when I give a tour on him at our local African American Historical Society, I think people don't realize what a deep thinker he was. And we have quotes posted around the room to show that, this man really was a deep thinker. There's more to him than his music.
Yeah.
And just recently, I was watching something on Nina Simone where she was singing a jazz tune, and she threw this Bach in the middle of it and then came back. And I was like, wow, I was just totally blown away. So I can imagine your inspiration as you listen to both of these artists as you work.
Yeah. And did you see her documentary by chance?
I did not.
So she was talking about her experience, I think when she was playing at Carnegie Hall, and she wanted to, sort of, play classical music, and she was pushed to not play that music. And I think, if I were there, I would have been, encouraged, like pushed or encouraged to do that. So sort of, and that's, a part of like that true freedom, if you will, and not having fear of sort of what the response is going to be, but being true to oneself. And
I have to give respect to her because she had a difficult path.
oh
And
yeah.
still, as I said, artists, they have something that has to come out.
Hmm.
So even through the difficult path that she had in life, she knew there was music that she had to express.
Right.
I have to commend her for what she's done. And after looking at this, I thought, I knew my family's background is music, so I knew what she had gone through. But I have to go back and address this again at this point in life to appreciate what she's gone through. And I knew it, but I need to read it and hear it again. So I've been listening to some Nina Simone lately.
Good.
Yeah. It's great. Well, I had to admit, when I posed that question to you, I thought of, okay, answering the question myself, who would I want to talk to in history? And I have to admit, one was a brother who passed in 98. And I want to tell him that the children are okay. His kids are okay. Meet your grandchildren. You got beautiful great grandkids. And then I thought Michelle Obama, because she's someone, let's take the high road.
Yeah.
And as you say, sometimes we can get so bogged down in what I said, being the hamster on the wheel.
Hmm.
Remember to take the high road. And then I thought of history. I always like this concept of time travel.
Yeah.
And I thought of Frederick Douglass. I mean, when he escaped from slavery in 1838, and he's lived both sides of this. And I'm looking at my own family's history and looking at my great-great-grandfather and how far removed from slavery was he, and knowing as I'm reading each name that as they made that struggle and made life through that, there I am, and there the next generation is on the other side.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Sam, I thank you for this wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it. I was looking forward to it. And if you come to Fort Wayne, please stop in and see the exhibition. Should I get to Indianapolis, I'll try to knock on your studio door for a minute. I don't know where it is, but I will find you.
We'll have to make both of those things happen.
But thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Are there any other last words of wisdom you want to leave to us?
Oh my gosh. No,
Am I giving you all the hard questions tonight?
I don't know. It's I think off the cuff for me to give words of wisdom. I'm not, I'm not sure I'm really prepped to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I think, going back and sort of reiterating what we were saying earlier about finding the good in things. And I think in my work, even though you described a lot of the work as as beautiful and visually pleasing, I think for me, in making the work in that way too, it's like it's trying to find beauty in the madness.
Mhm.
And I think through struggle, and like the struggle that we've gone through in the past year, and sort of really, I like to encourage people to find a way to do as much as they can to to think for themselves and slow down and sort of observe and ask questions rather than sort of taking things for sort of face value or taking things as they are in the way that they're presented to them.
That's true. I think that's a big one, to think for yourself. Think for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah,
Don't take the status quo. But then again, stop and look around you and realize how much unity, how much alike we all are.
exactly.
And I think that's the dichotomy between your work, knowing what you're expressing, from what source they are, but then they still have this, evoke this beautiful quality to them.
Thank
So
you.
again, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah.
I
There's
want to
one more.
encourage our audience to visit the museum, and also, again, thank our sponsors, PNC Bank.
I want to say one more thing too.
Sure.
You know, I think too, you know, in this last year or 4 to 5 years, you know, there's you know, I think we are quick to dismiss someone if they think differently.
Mhm.
And you know, I also encourage people to sort of kind of slow down and not be so quick to dismiss someone, but rather have a conversation. And I think through that conversation, you know, not even from, you know, and you know, being on the side of self, if you will, you know, and having a conversation with someone that who may be writing you off, and there could be, you know, a possible way of looking at things differently. We're just in such a, you know, an interesting moment right now where I think we're so, you know, short with ourselves and short with one another. And I think we need to do a better job at having sort of, you know, patience with each other.
I think through the pandemic, I came away with all the strife that happened is each one can reach one.
Yeah,
And if I can do nothing else, but I can make the difference to that one person and say, you know what, it's not as bad as you think. We're not all as different as you think. But I'm willing to reach out and let's make this better. Each one by one, just make this better, one by one.
beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to meeting you in person now. This virtual stuff has got to go.
Yeah. We'll
Thank
set
you
a
very
date.
much, Sam. I
Thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you.